Good afternoon. Greetings from the Climate Change Media Hub at the Asian College of Journalism. We welcome you to the second online session in our Climate Change Conversation series. Today's session explores an industry perspective on how MSMEs can lower Scope 3 emissions. The In Conversation session features Vivek Mehra and Ramesh. Vivek Mehra is the co-founder and CTO of Gurgaon-based Only Good that offers a sustainability intelligence platform for supply chain carbon reduction and compliance reporting. Vivek has spent over 30 years consulting globally for technology products and services firms across multiple verticals. He has a background in technology, strategy, data, and design. Ramesh M is consulting editor at the Hindu Business Line. He's covered a range of subjects, notably renewable energy, climate change, and the business of science. He currently anchors the clean tech and quantum special pages at the newspaper. This conversation will last for 45 minutes. It will be followed with a 15-minute question and answer session. So kindly hold on to your questions until then. Now, with this, I will hand over to the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ramesh, over to you.
So while we wait, maybe I can begin by talking about what it is Only Good does. So I'm calling from Gurgaon right now.
Right.
And one of the reasons we founded this company, so there's three of us founders. My partner Rajiv Sinha has a background in supply chain and SAP. And my other partner, Shwetam Sinha, has a background in strategy and technology leadership. The reason we exist is because we're trying to solve the problem for supply chain emissions. So what has happened over the last, I guess, 20 years, everybody has been claiming to measure emissions from factories and reporting on the impact industry has on climate. The problem has been that most of the I guess disclosures have been very qualitative and have focused really on survey-based methods for what is happening, which are by definition a point in time. And what happened since, I think the last 10 years, the Securities and Exchange Board of India, SEBI, has been focused on building out its own disclosure policy, which manifests itself through what is the BRSR report, or the Business Responsibility and Sustainability Report, as many of you would know. And that's been about 10 years in the making. And so it was introduced initially as a pilot. This year, at least 1,000 of all of the listed companies have to comply. And the BRSR report is also derived from what is called the Global Reporting Initiative, or the GRI standard, which is the mother of all standards for disclosures on climate. And most of the European and other countries' reporting standards have been based on the GRI report. So that is new. It's since 2023, this mandate to disclose emissions, not just for an enterprise, but also for its supply chain. That is new. And previously, what used to be a qualitative exercise, as I mentioned, has now become a data intensive exercise. The expectation is that you will disclose your goals in terms of net zero, what you want to achieve. And even as you grow, you have to be moving towards your net zero goals, whether it is by using alternative materials or switching supply chains, etc. And you will disclose emissions not just for yourself, but also for a large part of your value chain. So that is the new change that we are dealing with since 2023. So I'll pause there. Ramesh, you're back. I was just explaining.
I'm sorry, I suddenly went offline.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have to figure out how that happened, but fortunately I'm back online.
No worries.
Well, thanks for this brief.
Yeah, I was just giving an
So then
overview
let me
of
start off.
the context. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah. So Vivek, first of all, I would request you to tell this audience about yourself, about your company.
Yeah.
I may have missed it in the last couple of minutes or so, but in case you haven't, just tell me about it. Very fortunately, we are holding this meeting. You know, just a few days back, the government came out with this greenhouse gas emission intensity reduction targets for 208 more industries.
Right.
That takes the total number of industries to 490. There will be more coming in. You were speaking about the existing base, the rules for compliance. Regardless of that, these greenhouse gas emission intensity reduction targets are going to take it down the line, down the supply chain. It is going to impact MSMEs. So it is this background we are having this meeting. So it is very essential for us. So you are in the middle of all this, your company. It is
That's
helping all these companies measure emissions to the extent I understand about your company, measure emissions, report, and so on. So why don't you tell us in your own words what exactly your company is, what does it do?
Right. So just to continue with the context setting, what we're looking at is a move from what was qualitative reporting over the last 20 years or so. Carbon is not new, emissions are not new, ESG as a term is not new, environment, social, and governance. What we are facing now is a slew of regulations, both globally and India-based, that are converging on a data-centric approach to ESG compliance and penalties for non-compliance. So the idea is to coerce industry into moving towards sustainable growth versus just ad hoc growth. So what that means essentially is that the assumption is that if you're a manufacturing unit or any kind of services industry even, you are emitting because of your business activity. You're emitting some carbon dioxide equivalent gases. It's measured in tons of CO2 equivalent, which includes methane, sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxide, etc., all the gases. But the unit of measurement is TCO2e. And the data that you need to collect to understand how much you're emitting in a given year or given month is energy, water, waste, transportation. So energy could be any source of energy, whether it's grid, electricity, solar, wind, biomass, etc. It includes all of the purchased goods and materials. It includes things like impact on the environment. So the regulation now, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, is very comprehensive. It is data-based, and it assumes that sometimes 95% of your emissions that are attributable to you live outside of the enterprise. That means the raw material that comes into your factories, the finished goods that leave your factories onto trucks to go to your distributors, that is downstream from you. All of that comprises of what is called a value chain. Your suppliers upstream and your suppliers downstream, or distributors downstream. The attribution of your products, the impact your products have on the environment is attributable to you and should be part of your emissions. You can no longer say that, look, I manufacture cars, and once I'm done with the manufacturing, it's not my problem. No, the car runs on a road, it runs for 10, 15 years, then it has an end of life, the materials are recycled or not, it goes into landfill. All of that is attributable to you. Before the car is manufactured, the material, the mineral extraction, the steel making, the logistics to get the steel into your door so that you can make the car, all of that is attributed to your emissions. So there is emission intensity is what Ramesh was mentioning. Now the question is, if you are only emitting 5% and you measure what you're doing, clearly the 95% is unaccounted for. And that's what the regulation hopes to address. That, look, it's not just what you're doing, it's what your supply chain is doing for you. And the finished product, when it enters the marketplace, are you tracking the circularity of it? So why we exist is we want to put a data-based reporting regimen across the value chain. So essentially, if we provide a platform, a tech platform that captures these data points, energy, water, waste, transportation for the enterprise, we also give it to the suppliers. So we onboard suppliers, they automatically get onboarded. It becomes an ecosystem of shared data and data pipelines. Think of it like an ERP. If you were to run a fulfillment business, it would be like an ERP, but for carbon and social and governance type data. The social and governance data doesn't change very often, right? That those are things like gender diversity or workplace safety, in terms of governance, how often or how regularly you pay taxes, and do you have policies for different things. So those data points don't change. It's the environmental aspects that change very often. And the advantage of measuring it through a tech platform is because it's simply impossible to do it using survey-based methods. You cannot run around Excel with Excel to thousands of suppliers globally. These supply chains are not local, by the way. Many Indian suppliers supply to OEMs overseas and vice versa. So these are global supply chains. You cannot tabulate this data and compute it month on month and expect accuracy, because just like financial disclosure, the regulations now demand disclosure that is auditable, which means it needs to have a trail of evidence. You cannot simply say, I use 100 kilowatt hours of electricity if you do not have an invoice to back up that claim. So that's the reason you need some technology to help you with this. So I'll pause there. Ramesh, is that context enough?
Yeah, that's a good context. But go on. From this point, you tell me how your company is helping MSMEs do this.
So what we do is we essentially provide, think of it as a receptacle for data. So one is helping both the parent enterprise and its onboarded suppliers with how to get data in there. What data should we get, in what formats, whether it is from electricity or water meter readings directly through sensors and devices, or if the invoices exist in an SAP or an ERP type system, we can read from that. Sometimes you can just take a picture with your phone, and we have an AI computer vision enabled data ingestion, which can read a bill, save the bill for posterity with your timestamp and the login ID of the person, creating an audit trail, or simply an Excel upload. If you manage if you're a small supplier, let's say a few hundred or a few tens of crores of business, then you are managing probably in Excel. We can read from the Excel and upload that into the system. Once the data gets in the system, it becomes a repository that you can do trend analysis on and many other analyses. You can link it with production data, so you can find out how much carbon you are emitting per ton of product, per unit of product, per factory, per facility. You can compare and contrast facilities. And then when you're looking for hotspots, you know where to put solar, how much solar to put, where to switch suppliers, because you will get a scoring of your suppliers. Which are your green suppliers? Which are your brown suppliers? How much green? And you can start to influence their decision making in terms of what energy sources they use. So the objective, the holy grail for this is that you should know before you're building any product or letting out a service, how can you make it low carbon at design time before it even gets out manufactured. Can you design a low carbon product, because you know what materials will go in, you know which suppliers are the most efficient in terms of greenness to provide you those components. Then you farm it out to those suppliers. So what we provide is a technology platform for data, where you can create a data repository and you can create a baseline and then see how you're meeting your goals. You set your goals, you track against your goals.
And all this is, Vivek, sorry to interrupt. You're saying this is auditable, verifiable, auditable.
Yes. Yeah, because that's what the regulation wants. So a lot of these reporting agencies, including SEBI, and a lot of the EU reporting standards like the CSRD, the CBAM. CSRD is for Europe-based companies, which many Indian companies also are based in Europe now. CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, that requires Indian exporters to the EU in certain industries to disclose their carbon, without which they cannot export. And January 1st of this year is when the penalties have started kicking in, despite all the FTA agreements that India has been having as we speak with the EU Commission. This climate agenda is separate from the trade agenda. So even though duties have been reduced, as you would have read in the Economic Times, on many products, including automobiles, they have not made any meaningful change to the CBAM regulation, which exists as EU law. So Indian exporters in steel and fertilizer and other things have to disclose and then pay tax on the differential in terms of carbon pricing.
That's a very useful clarification, because in the run-up to this FTA, it was said that CBAM also might, kind of be deferred.
It was discussed. But I think the Europeans, no ruling, at least I have not read of any ruling that has given any kind of respite to Indian and for that matter, any other countries manufacturing. Because what they're trying to avoid is the Europeans, as they deindustrialized, they said, we don't have core manufacturing. We've farmed it out to suppliers in the emerging economies. They have the factories. They need to reduce their emissions. We don't have emissions. And so to prevent this kind of push out of the emissions, the EU has said, no, we will tax you on the way back.
Yeah. So coming back to India, our emission regulations, whether the 1,000 companies that are required to do this BSRS reporting,
right?
They are now required to do only scope 1 and scope 2. Scope 3 is not yet in.
That's right.
What is your sense of when that might happen? How much time do MSMEs have to pull up their socks and be ready for scope 3 emissions whenever that is made mandatory?
So I think there are several aspects to this. So I think, first of all, I am a believer that if you have to do this for compliance reasons, then
Might as well do it now.
Yeah, you're missing the point, right? Because for the smarter companies, and we have many clients which are MSMEs, not part of the BRSR reporting regimen. They don't need to report because they're not big enough or listed. They're doing it because they see this as a clear market differentiator, both domestically and internationally. If I'm a green company, all things being equal, then I will be chosen by my buyer. It is the buyer and customer expectations. I mean, everybody knows the climate we are facing. Everybody has seen global warming, the pollution, the flooding and the droughts, which are erratic. Everybody knows the world we're living in. It's not going to get any better. So people are starting to think about it. Smaller companies see this as an opportunity to comply. That said, many companies are going to find themselves caught already, because if I'm a large OEM that's listed on the Indian stock exchanges, I have to, and I'm a supplier to that company, I'm going to be called up, especially if I'm a tier 1 supplier, I'm going to be called up and asked for data. If I don't do it, then the risk to my business is significant. I mean, we've had clients where the invoices have been stalled by the buyer and because of lack of carbon disclosure. And the second thing is that it's a cost of doing business. It's no longer an optional thing. If your parent is expected to comply with regulation, then you by definition have to comply. It's no different than saying I'll have to provide my components or material in a timely fashion, in a cost-effective manner, as part of our supplier agreement. This now becomes part of the supplier agreement.
So what is the extent of awareness among the MSMEs today about this, let's say, opportunity or threat, whichever way you want to put it? Are MSMEs sufficiently alive to this opportunity?
Not at all. No, I think the awareness is abysmal. And I think it is the visionary CEOs and the visionary boards for MSMEs that are the ones who are seeing this as an opportunity. I see that the vast majority are, one, either oblivious. Second, they lack the understanding that this is not a nice to have anymore. This is a must have. So they're somehow expecting the government to take care of the regulation, and they're literally wishing it away, that the EU and India will come to some understanding. It won't happen. The penalties won't be enforced. The war is happening in Europe. People will be distracted. So let's do business as usual. It's kind of like when GST happened, people were like, oh, we'll see when it happens. We'll hire the CA then, or the auditor will call the auditor then, right? So it's a one-way street. So I think the sooner you do this, the better. It's almost like running a company without a good book of business or finance, having a good financial capability. It's the equivalent of that in today's time, especially in a globally interconnected world. It's not just India, actually. If you look at Singapore announced penalties for listed companies for non-disclosure, the Middle East in 2025 listed penalties. Even China has made noise around this. Japan is making noises. Every company has already stated net zero goals. But if those net zero goals are to be met, then there has to be action on the ground, which essentially means data collection at its very core. So if you don't do that, you are going to be in for some rude shocks, either through taxation, loss of business. We've already seen companies losing business. Some margins will be wiped out, especially for exporters to the EU that have not disclosed their carbon. There's some serious things that are going to happen. And meanwhile, if you say that, look, don't understand this data, I don't have anybody tasked with it, we don't know how to collect it. Well, that's why we exist. And there are all kinds of consulting companies also, right? It's not just platform companies. The problem only with consulting is they can only take you so far in terms of how to collect the data or doing a climate strategy. But the actual hoarding of the data, the trend analysis, the identification of hotspots, using AI to create prediction scenarios. What if you reduce your electricity by 10%? How much would your carbon reduce? What if you switch this supply chain? What will that do to your carbon footprint? I think that's only something that technology can do. And eventually, India also launched this CCT as the carbon cap and trade system last year. So that is going to provide the carrot aspect of this. That look, if you are carbon positive, there is going to be an exchange where you can sell your carbon credits to polluters. But how do you get a carbon credit if you don't do accounting? It's like you can't list on a stock exchange if you don't have the financial wherewithal to list on the exchange. It's kind of like that.
Well, I know that in this ecosystem, there are companies that can give carbon credits that are tradable. But what about certificates or some kind of instrument that will satisfy a European buyer that this is authentic, genuine? Do we have an ecosystem? Of course, you are there. You are a part of this ecosystem. But is the ecosystem enough? Do we have?
Yes.
Well, there are crores of MSMEs.
That's right. The system exists. In fact, there are MSMEs, as we speak in India, that have already listed on global exchanges, that have gotten the global certificate. So these certificates are not issued by local bodies, they're global. So there's Verra, there's the gold standard, there's companies like that provide, when you buy or sell carbon credits, these companies give you a certificate. These are globally recognized certificates, including in the EU. And these are a prerequisite to listing on an exchange for carbon credits. So companies are also starting to now buy offsets. So let's say you are polluting more than you wished against your carbon roadmap. You can then purchase these offsets, and you get a certificate to show that you actually have these offsets recorded. And then as you get to be positive, you can find buyers that are polluting more than they should.
Okay.
So globally, it's a very separate thing. Yeah.
Once again, the Verra and gold standards of the world that give this certificate.
Yes, that's right.
And you provide the data. Companies like you provide the data that will satisfy gold standard or Verra, the issuing bodies to give certificates for this.
That's right. So think of us as the creators of the CA that creates the balance sheet and the P&L statement, which is internally audited. Then you need an external auditor, because we cannot audit our own stuff. So you need an external auditor that will look at the evidence, do a financial audit like carbon audit, and see, yeah, all the books are good. Now we can issue a certificate.
So my question is really, if I were one of those pioneering MSME CEOs, I'm not helpless. Supposing I want to do this, there is help available at hand in India.
That's right. In fact, one of the reasons Only Good was started was to democratize this, right? We understand that MSMEs are typically the underserved buyers of technology, of consulting, especially of ESG type platforms. So the fact that we are India-based and not Europe-based, the fact that we offer the platform to many suppliers for free, and help with data onboarding, because we charge the parent subscription, and through that it sort of is disseminated to all the suppliers who want to onboard. Now, if a supplier wants to become their own parent and go further below their level 1, level 2, which is the parents level 3 and 4, then of course they'll have to become parents and subscribe. But we are trying to democratize the data collection and and evangelize sort of the concept behind why we're doing this. So what people don't realize, I mean, the big myth is that this is expensive. So
I was just going to come to that point only.
Yeah. So it's not expensive, right? It pays for itself within a month or two, simply by measuring, where the wastage is happening. A simple thing like electricity, water. If you are not tracking it, so you may have been doing pollution checks and you have invoices for electricity you are paying. What happens is, when you convert electricity, water, waste, transportation, all these to a common number, which is the TCO2e unit, it harmonizes the data, and you can see per unit of production which facility, which plant, which floor, which assembly line is leaking carbon. and why? And then you start to see what are the best practices. This is this is the antithesis of just putting some solar ad hoc. Oh, we think we need solar. Let's just put some rooftop solar. But why? And what is it going to save you? Or I'm going to recycle, but I'm going to send my recycled material to China. Well, there's a large carbon footprint there. So people don't realize many activity, not all recycling is the same. For example, not all energy is the same. If you're using the sawdust that is a byproduct and you reuse that for your energy needs, you will become net zero in no time. So it's not expensive. The technology is fairly democratized in that it is easy to use. That is our job, to make it easy to use using AI and whatever mechanisms we have. So the data collection, which used to be a chore, you don't have to be an expert in data science to get this data. It's not that. Yeah.
But I think we are talking about, I would like to distinguish between two costs. One is the cost of measuring and getting the certificate. The other is the cost of compliance itself. So is the second type of cost, is that, what do you think? Is it scary? Is it huge?
So traditional methods, yes. So think of it this way, right? Let's say I'm a 2000 crore company. I have, let's say, 500 or maybe 1,000 tier one suppliers. Now, if I were to collect data from 1,000 suppliers, maybe two of them in Africa, one in Europe, one in Singapore. If I were to collect data for these attributes, energy, water, waste, from each of my suppliers every month in Excel, and I have to send, even if I do it, let's say, without visiting them, that's pretty onerous. And then I apply emission factors to those raw data elements to create a carbon footprint. Then I add it all up and then make sure that when the emission factors change every 6 months, I've updated the system. And then I hire a small team to create an ESG report annually. It becomes very expensive. The only answer to this is to create automatic data pipelines and to automate as much as possible so that it's low touch, ideally no touch, but we understand that there's humans involved, so it will be low touch, and use AI as much as possible to fill in the gaps to make sure the evidence is kept. So the invoices to suppliers, the electricity bills, the truck invoices for logistics, all of that is kept with the data. Everything is timestamped and auditable. And so when the auditor comes, they have their separate dashboard. They can just click on any random number and say, okay, hey, what happened on that date? Who entered this data? What is their employee ID? So there's a whole ISO process that governs this data collection and dissemination. That process has been around and globally accepted for years. The problem is that the technology is only now available for MSMEs, that they can buy it cheaply as a subscription. So this is not some large SAP or ERP type install where the whole company has to shut down for 6 months, get a lot of consultants and systems integrators in to put the pipes in place. No, this is simply, you can start like in a couple of hours. All you need to identify is, here is the data. I'm going to do this. I have a vision. The technology is not the issue. It's more of a mindset. Do I want to do this? Is now the right time? Should I wait for penalties to hit? Those are the questions people typically have.
So what you're saying, Vivek, is that it is neither difficult nor very costly to set up a system where you can measure emissions.
That's right.
But I have moved on to the next question. Once you know that here is where I'm leaking carbon, here is where there is a problem, to set that right and get the numbers in order, will I need to spend a lot?
So
it's probably the question before MSMEs today.
Yeah, so no, that yes and no. So for example, if you are finding that you're using machines that are 30 years old and are polluting machines, right? And you're, let's say, making some machine parts, and the machines need to be changed if you want low carbon machines, or the machines are running on CNG and you need to electrify them, or they're running on diesel and you need to electrify them. Yes, that's a large capex, and you have to do the cost benefit analysis to say, okay, does it make sense to do it en masse or transition into it or do it piecemeal, etc. Those decisions all will obviously be capex. But the question I will ask is, that's the wrong way to go about it. First of all, do you need to know it's against the machines? Maybe your carbon is hidden in the value chain. Maybe you just need to get a supplier who's supplying you low carbon parts, which are just as good in quality wise, just as cost effective, you switch your supply chains. What if you use alternative materials? You use recycled plastic versus virgin plastic, things like that. So it's not always high capex. Solar, for example, is typically you can have an OPEX or a capex model for introducing rooftop solar. If you don't have roofs available, you can buy solar electricity at a discounted price. So there are all kinds of options available. For transportation, you have a fleet of diesel buses. You can convert them to EV or CNG and reduce your employee cost of commute. Many things. There are some things that are simply design issues. Simply designing a factory, maybe having fewer airline trips, maybe using other modes of transport. Those don't cost anything. So as a portfolio, it's I would venture to say it's not expensive. Not everything requires capex. Some of them are design issues. Some of them are legacy issues that you have to solve regardless of your ESG compliance needs, just to stay in business. But if your buyer wants a certain green credential, what choice do you have? So then it is existential. It's not simply, oh, I will save some more money by not doing this now. No, you will be out of business.
So you have to fall in line one way or the other, like it or not.
Yeah, that's right. And it's the right thing to do. You don't do it just for compliance. Your buyer is asking. You can see what's happening. If you're going to be a cleaner, greener business with happier employees, you will be more profitable. You will be. It's just you have to apply your mind to doing this for the right reasons. Not everything is expensive, and the technology is here to help. So why not?
And the other question that occurred to me is, Vivek, a large company may kind of lean on its MSME in the supply chain and force it to fall in line, do things that are that have an impact on emission reduction. But MSMEs also have their own supply chains, right?
Correct.
They don't begin from the scratch. I mean, I'm not talking of tiny MSMEs, not the micro part of MSMEs, but a company, let's say 500 crores, 600 crores company, it's probably buying stuff from various people. Now, does this MSME have the ability, the wherewithal, the influence to tell its suppliers, you better do this or you're out? So
Yes,
it leaves the MSME in a kind of a quandary, right? I mean,
yeah.
Somebody above me is forcing me to do this, but I have no means to pass it on to the guy who is supplying to me. So have you come across situations like this, and how do MSMEs deal with this situation typically?
Yeah, no, it's a very common situation. In fact, we have designed for this. We spent 5 years designing the platform for exactly this. And this is not a unique problem to ESG or sustainability compliance. It has been solved in the fulfillment and the ERP space already. So when you have a long supply chain, global supply chain, how do you ensure that there is just-in-time manufacturing? The person who's supplying you the smallest nut or valve and the person who's supplying you steel know how to fit their components in terms of fulfillment and procurement into a final product. This is the same thing. So if I'm an MSME and I'm already compliant and I have some technology like the Only Good platform to provide data to my parent buyer, the same platform can be cascaded down to my suppliers, my tier 1, tier 2, 3 suppliers, because one, the cost is going to be near zero because we are only charging the parent. Again, the idea is it's a collaborative effort. So in carbon and in ESG and in climate, what everybody will tell you is that it's a collaborative exercise. If every factory is green, but there's one factory that's polluting, the environment is still polluted. So unless we all collaborate, it's not going to be a greener world. So to that end, if the parent is only asking its tier 1 to comply, that's not really anything, because most of the emission, as I said, is 95, 98% is throughout the value chain. So the deeper you go, the greener you get. So what is the point of a platform if it cannot cascade down? So one, it's easy. Everybody gets the same platform. They all realize the benefits of energy optimization for themselves, even before they satisfy the parent need for data. So it is self-serving. It pays for itself within a couple of months, in fact, sometimes even a month, just by making visible what is invisible before this, which is, where is the leak? Where are the hotspots? Is it the machine? Is it the assembly line? Is it a particular plant? Is it a particular supplier? And so on. So the short answer is yes, absolutely. Every MSME, regardless of size, can use this. And the cost is typically not the issue. Like I said before, it is really, I don't know how to deal with this. I've never had done this before. I don't know what data is needed. Those questions are authentic. But we have help for those as well, where we handhold through webinars or plant visits. We educate people. And the behavioral aspect is really about creating a culture of sustainability and carbon consciousness in the organization. It's you cannot just ask somebody for data without telling them why you're asking for it, and it's in
Yeah.
everybody's benefit. There's a role HR can play in making data collection part of a KRA or complete and accurate data collection. What the system validates is, if you say you put some data in, well, can you give me some evidence? Without that, I'm going to flag it. It's not auditable then.
Okay, so we have established the context for this, the need for this, and you're saying, okay, there is an ecosystem that is, there is this ecosystem to help this company, whichever companies wants to
That's
do
right.
this. And then it has to go right down the supply chain.
That's right.
Now, what about financiers? How is the level of awareness among financiers, the financing community? Are they helpful? Are they
So in
coming
terms
forward
of
for this?
financing energy transition, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, also, yeah, energy
So
transition one, and then also supporting, all these companies to do this compliance if it required finance.
So today, say the data is fragmented. What we see is that the most companies actually do not have necessarily an ESG department or a compliance department that focuses on sustainability. It's really some operational head that's been promoted into sustainability because it's a very new thing, relatively new. There is typically the CFO, the office of the CFO, or the financial office that is responsible for decision making around this. And they obviously need to have an ROI analysis. So we provide that as well to the finance team, that here is how you will get an ROI from your sustainability investments, whether it's solar, is having better effluent treatment, waste management, et cetera, et cetera. So there is clearly a financial aspect to this. Nobody's just going to throw money at it, regardless of compliance. There needs to be some rational plan. So the ROI is the number one question from the finance department. What we do see is that the valuations of companies increase when they are greener. So especially if you're financed by, we've seen this a lot with the European funds or the European banks. When they invest, they look for green credentials because they have to satisfy that they have a greener portfolio. And the only way they do that is they know they're lending to a company that has something green about them. So they ask for disclosure. Even if you're a small company and you're asking for investment, like a Series A, Series B investment, I mean, we do that for ourselves. We're a green company. We're almost net zero. So we are doing this because not just out of ethics, which is of course there, but also because there is a financial need to increase our valuation as a company. If you're greener, your valuation is higher. You get preferential lending rates even from the government of India. There are all kinds of schemes available. Different state governments have different schemes. So it's part altruistic, but also part financial. It makes financial sense. If you are going to get an ROI from solar in, let's say, 2 to 3 years, sometimes even sooner, why will you not do this and become, free of those costs and lower your emissions at the same time?
So the question is really that the money is available. Access to finance is not a problem for these companies.
It's not a problem. In fact, the gates are carbon disclosure is a significant gate. Because everybody wants to know what you're going to do with the money. If you are going to be just as polluting as you were, well, then I'm not as ready to give you money at the rates you want. So the rates are lower. A lot of banks will have these green bonds and will have preferential lending, especially the international banks.
So you are saying rates are lower, but that's not the impression that we've been getting so far from this green bond side of it. Maybe access is a little easier, but it didn't so far really
So the
translate into
challenge,
lower rates. But if that is happening now, from what you say, it is a very heartening
no,
development.
so it's yes and no. See, the challenge always has been that the companies asking for this have not been able to show enough data because they've not been
That's the point.
collecting it. Yeah. So if I give you a qualitative report from a consultant from last year and say, look, they just gave me a glowing AAA rated company for greenness. Well, there was a point in time. Maybe I polluted after that. There's no data to show either way. So how do I believe you? So then it falls away. It centers really on if you can show me logs of the material that you have procured. So if you show me your carbon footprint and how it's trending and how you're diverging towards your stated net zero goals, it's a very different story. So it's often comes back to lack of data, honestly.
So you're saying the financials is saying prove it and I'll lower the rates
Yeah,
for you.
that's right.
Okay. Now, where does India stand in comparison with other developing countries in the whole system? Are we doing better than others? Are we doing worse?
See,
What's your sense?
I don't have data to say whether we're doing better or
What's your
worse.
gut sense?
So, but my gut sense is India is marching at a fairly good clip. I mean, just to give you some anecdotal data points, like last year, I would have had to explain any small to medium enterprise I called. I would have to explain what scope three emissions are, why it's important, why they should be looking at it. I would literally have to spell carbon. Now the discussions in less than 12 months, the discussions are more around, okay, how do I reduce it? They know the names of the reports. They know what BRSR is. They know that their buyer is asking for data. They're not bewildered by it anymore. They just have a lack of awareness on how to do it. They're not questioning the why anymore. That's what we're seeing. Because there is a lot of convergence in the markets, even in South Asia, Southeast Asia, Singapore, Indonesia, Australia, the Middle East, also. Not just Europe. Europe, of course, started this, but everybody else is also talking the same language. So wherever they go, MSMEs, like we are part of trade delegations. Like I was with one from the UK just on Friday. And there is no surprise for Indian companies anymore. They know if they have to do international dealings, even smaller companies. I may be selling some kind of small fastener to the EU market or to Southeast Asia. They know they are subject to these regulations. Public sector units in India now have new awareness. Even Transcoms, Discoms, everybody is, because India has stated goals for net zero and reducing to 50% by so and so by I think 2035. So there is that goal, and companies realize that that goal is not going to be met, and there will be some penalties unless there is action on the ground. And it starts with looking at what data they are collecting or not. So I think India is doing reasonably well. I know we work with some energy companies, so solar is quite robust. I still think for MSMEs, it's not near as adequate as I would have liked to see. Somehow there is a lot of inertia, and there is a lot of
No, my question was from the MSME perspective only,
yeah. So for
Shastra.
MSMEs, I see a lot of inertia, and I think there's a lot of ignorance still. So so I would encourage everybody who is aware of not just the reporting and compliance needs, but really the benefits of going green. I would like, or in fact, I welcome the competition we have for platforms and all the consultants that we work with to educate and evangelize green companies, because I think India certainly can be a leader in this space. This is for small economies or smaller economies or emerging economies. I think there is no leadership right now, and India is well placed to take that. And China, of course, has made huge strides in solar. India's thing, I think, is still ranked 6 or 7 in terms of percentage of electricity from solar. But we are getting there. I think the awareness for MSMEs is really low, though. I would have liked to see it higher.
Okay. Now, picking on one point that you made, benefits of going green. On this, will you be in a position to give me an example, a case study, maybe an anecdote, how a company that you helped
So,
actually
so we
did
had
better?
one automotive client that obviously I can't name that, but they came to us, I think a few months back, almost a year back, and they were struggling because they had a 15, 20-year relationship with a German automaker, and they created an Excel report, and they'd sent to the OEM saying that, okay, this is what we're doing, and they got a bad score on that report. And suddenly that 15, 20-year-old relationship was in crisis. It wasn't just invoices being stored. It was more like, we're not sure we can do business with you anymore. Because it's very fuzzy, it's not data backed, it's just anecdotal, it's point in time. So either you give us some real data, or we'll have to rethink our supply chain. And so that was an existential issue. Since then, that company has not only cemented their relationship with the buyer, they started using our platform. We created a baseline, we put their goals in the system. And there are agencies that record these goals. It's for everybody to see, like SBTI goals and things like that. And then they went to the next step. The hotspots were identified. Let's put in some solar. So now they're seeing at least a 30% saving in energy costs alone.
30%.
30%, 30.
Wow.
So this is an existential, and this is not a very large MSME, but it's a significant MSME. And they have cemented their buyer relationship and saved their business. They have seen efficiencies of at least 30% in energy savings in about a year, I would say. And largely from solar, but simply from just even design changes and just understanding what they were doing in one factory. They wanted to just replicate that in another factory. Just seeing the differences in the factories that were producing the same thing was kind of eye-opening, because this lens is very different. A carbon lens is very different from a pollution lens, an energy optimization lens, an energy only optimization lens, etc. Water conservation.
I take it that you are not in a position to name this client of yours.
Right. I mean, that would not be
You can't.
ethical, yes.
Uh,
But
as,
I'm
as
but
journalists,
rest
you'd love
assured,
to have.
I know, but rest assured that this is not an odd example. We have one of our other clients that is also an MSME, and they are close to being net zero. They're based in fact, they had some auditors come and say, okay, how come the air coming from your chimneys is cleaner than the air outside? Right? And they said, you're fudging something, right? And it wasn't. It was just,
That's a
and they had
typical
repeat,
auditor
yeah,
stance.
they had repeat audits because they thought they were hiding something, and they're close to being net zero this year. So we have many examples. Again, this is a visionary CEO. It's not like they're doing it for some fear of compliance, but the energy cost savings is just the start of it. Because when you look at the other S&G aspects, gender diversity or good governance, having a good governance board, it just makes for a healthier and more prosperous environment. And you create your own path for sustainable growth. It's not just growth at all costs and you destroy the environment you are, because it's sort of paradoxical, right? If you're going to destroy what you're creating, the wealth you're creating, you're just going to destroy it because it's going to just crash down. What's the
You're
point?
going to destroy yourself.
That's right. And yeah, it's not some abstract thought. I mean, we see it happening. We see it happening. And even I know, like Rajiv used to run, my partner before Only Good, he used to run an apparel business. And how one of the reasons we started Only Good was he saw something like a 20% uptick in his business when he started doing circular fashion. He was in the women's apparel business and selling online. And he noticed when he started having a green tag and data backed again, and saying that when you return this garment, we will show you where it's going. It's not going in landfill. It will be refurbished on recycled, and you get a discount on the next one since you deposited this one. We saw 20% uptick in the business, even though there was an extra charge or extra cost for that green garment. So people are willing to, especially the younger generation is willing to pay for green because they see the long-term benefit.
This reminds me of what one of our industry leaders, Mr. Santanam, who used to run Saint-Gobain for many, many years, has always been saying. He says, sustainability pays.
It does.
Okay. Now, Vivek, we have two comments in the chat box. One is a question, the other is a comment. So I'll take up the question first.
Sure.
Samriddhi is asking this question. She is saying, do you think India could lose out to China in attracting green investments if it continues to move slowly and leave ESG largely to the markets when ignorance is so high? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think
Important.
it's a very complex situation, right? Because if you look at some of the big polluters like North America, right, they've almost abandoned this quest for green, and because they think it slows them down. So China has, while it has made some noise in the sustainability space, there is no, and it requires, of course, green disclosure. But I'm not sure India will lose out to China. I think India has bigger problems to solve. I think India's rate of greenness or green adoption or energy transition should be independent of what China is doing or not doing. I think for our own sake, honestly, that's my personal view. I think it may or
No, I
may not
think the
be.
question is, if will India lose out to China if it continues to move slowly?
So I think there will be bigger impact. Not losing out to China is not the. I think it's of course it will lose out to China and many other things. But I think, for example, having better infrastructure, taking care of air quality, taking care of just green mindedness in every enterprise. I don't think economically India will lose. I think in the long run, India will win if it moves faster. Yes. Will it lose if it moves slower? I think it's a very complex question. I don't know if I have the data to answer that one. Possibly it could lose to China if people are saying, look, China is not hung up on greenness. They are just producing more and more. We will continue to invest in China. But I have seen of late, especially the Europeans, they have been, China is not attracting new investment like India is. India is losing out on investment not because they're moving slowly on green, but for other reasons. Like an overvalued market, for example, or lack of infrastructure, or the traditional concerns people have with India.
M. Murli has this comment saying accounting carbon offsets in India has been dismal, to say the least, not to mention listed companies involved. So, would you have a reaction to that?
Yeah, I'm not an expert in the offsets, but that is absolutely true. I don't think the average customer that we have is looking for offsets right now. I think we're still in kindergarten when it comes to managing the emissions we have. Buying offsets are large companies of the world that know they're polluting. They buy offsets at the beginning of the year, like a Delta Airlines or like an ExxonMobil. They know that they have to show certain numbers, so they will buy large offsets. In India, it's not caught on yet. One, because there's no transparency yet. We don't have our own cap and trade system. Some companies that use the Verra and the gold standard certificates, they are doing it, but very, very small scale to list on exchanges like GCC, the Qatar exchange. Companies have listed there. In agriculture, I think there's 4 or 5 projects that are looking to list, but none has yet, I don't think. So yes, it has been dismal. And I think it largely has to do with, one, awareness. The second would be lack of transparency, since India doesn't have its own carbon trade exchange yet.
Not yet, but
Yeah,
it's
and
coming.
plus, I think companies are just not that mature. They're getting to the first step of first measuring what we have. Forget reducing.
Okay, it's been a very, very interesting session. We got a number of useful points. First of all, you said 95% of an enterprise's emissions lie outside its premises. And then you're saying the ecosystem for helping these companies measure their emissions exists. It is not difficult to do. It is not. It is not costly. It is neither difficult nor costly. And those companies that take pioneering steps actually benefit, and they have benefited.
Absolutely.
And the financing system is also aware of this, and it's very helpful. So a lot of positive indications from what you're saying. Any concluding remarks, Vivek?
No, I just, forums like these are very good in that, a lot of people and young people will go back and with some of these ideas and start to look around them and see what can we as individuals do, which companies can we impact, can we evangelize low carbon products. And of course, ultimately, the biggest carbon saving is from conscious consumption, right? Which is how much are you consuming as an individual, as a buyer, as a consumer. So it will rest there. The responsibility is for everyone. It is certainly a collaborative exercise, but I think companies really need to get their act together for the sake of India's growth, certainly, but also for their own economic growth, because without economic sustainability, there's no environmental sustainability, clearly.
Yeah. Preeti, are there any questions, any raised hands that I have missed, perhaps?
Yes, anyone wants to ask a question?
Yes, Srinivasan, please go ahead.
So, if I may, I just wanted to ask, how much of a setback the climate denialism of the Trump administration and the way is basically disrupted any multilateral rules-based organization or system done to this whole this thing of environmental this thing and emissions control. He's pulled out of the Paris Agreement, and being the still the largest economy in the world, it sort of drives, sets a direction and tone.
That's right. That's right. I think it's been a mixed bag. I mean, from where I sit, what I see it is a lot of it is the politics of and geopolitics that is I think only known to the administration of how they're dealing with it. But on the ground, what's happening is many Republican states, even in the US, have a net zero target. The fact is that the Americans' adoption of solar is much higher than India's as a percentage. So those facts are also hard to ignore. While it is continues to be the biggest emitter because it's one of the most developed economies, most developed industrial infrastructure, are reasons enough for it to be a large emitter. And of course, the consumption patterns are different. That said, I think there's a lot of action on the ground, the move towards electric vehicles. Yes, wind has taken, I think, a little bit of a setback, but even then, there's a lot of energy still created by existing wind projects. The local net zero goals require states to take further the investments they've already made in EV infrastructure. So I think a lot of this, if you take out the optics and the politics of it, the energy transition is, I think, a one-way street. I think what may at best happen is some delay in because fossil is certainly going to get cheaper for some parts of the world. But I think the existing investments will ensure that the greening will happen. So I think it is not necessarily a setback. It's a very mixed bag, is what I would say.
Well, great then, Vivek. Thank you very much. To me personally, you've been a great resource person, and I would like you to be a resource person to all the participants here. If you permit us, we will leave your email ID with them so they can get in touch with you. This is an evolving industry, evolving, unfolding situation. So we would always constantly need help from experts like you. So, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Grateful to have spent so much time with us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you
would
so
like
much.
to say something?
Yeah.
Yes, of course. I wanted to say it's a really interesting session, and I think journalists specifically have learned a lot from it. And also, I wanted to thank the participants for attending today's session. And thank you so much, Mr. Mehra. It was very interesting. Thank you, Ramesh.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you, Ramesh.
Vivek.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.